The moment the lights dimmed in that crowded premiere hall and the massive screen flickered to life, nobody expected the silence that followed to feel heavier than applause, because what was meant to be a glamorous comeback instantly turned into an uncomfortable pause that stretched like a storm cloud hanging over Hollywood, with industry insiders exchanging glances and social media already buzzing before the first scene even finished playing, as whispers spread that the highly anticipated project tied to Melania Trump was not landing the way its creators hoped. And in that first tense minute, the tone was already clear, not of celebration, but of shock, confusion, and growing doubt about whether this cinematic gamble had misfired beyond repair. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, share your review in the comments, and make sure to watch the video till the end so you don't miss anything important. Behind the velvet ropes and flashing cameras, executives leaned in close, their polished smiles hiding rising panic as early audience reactions rolled in through phones like breaking news alerts, some calling it disconnected, others saying it felt forced, while critics quietly typed notes that would soon explode into viral headlines. And in that carefully controlled room of glamour, the uncomfortable truth was taking shape that this film, promoted as a powerful global moment, was slipping fast into something far more dangerous in the entertainment world. Irrelevance mixed with ridicule, the kind that doesn't fade overnight but grows louder with every passing hour. What made the moment even more dramatic was how heavily the project had leaned on Melania's name, her global recognition used as a branding engine to sell mystery, prestige, and influence. But instead of drawing admiration, it seemed to ignite skepticism, with viewers questioning whether fame alone could replace storytelling depth. And that disconnect created a wave of reaction, not just about the movie itself, but about the idea of celebrity-driven productions trying to command respect without earning it through craft, turning what should have been an artistic showcase into a symbol of overconfidence meeting public reality. Within minutes of the screening ending, social platforms erupted like fireworks, clips of awkward moments circulating, hashtags forming at lightning speed, and commentary flooding timelines with a mix of disbelief and sharp humor, while entertainment journalists rushed to frame the narrative of a stunning flop, describing empty seats at later showings, weak ticket sales projections, and insiders quietly confirming that expectations had been wildly overestimated, painting a picture not of a slow disappointment, but of an immediate collapse that no amount of PR spin could fully contain. For Melania, who had largely remained distant from public controversies compared to her husband's political storms, this moment represented a rare spotlight focused directly on her own venture, and the pressure was immense because this was not just a movie, but a statement of personal influence beyond politics, an attempt to shape a new narrative chapter. Yet the audience response suggested that the world was not ready to embrace that transition so easily, and in the ruthless environment of modern media, perception can change in seconds, transforming ambition into a cautionary tale almost overnight. Industry analysts began dissecting what went wrong, pointing to rushed production schedules, marketing strategies that relied more on name recognition than story substance, and a tone that failed to connect emotionally with viewers, while others argued that the film never clearly defined its audience, drifting between drama and spectacle without fully committing to either, creating confusion instead of engagement. And as box office forecasts were revised downward hour by hour, the numbers told a story even harsher than online criticism, one of a project struggling to recover from its opening stumble. And as the night wore on, what should have been a celebration slowly transformed into a quiet retreat, with guests leaving early, conversations hushed, and the once glowing atmosphere fading into awkward silence, setting the stage for what many were already calling one of the most surprising entertainment disappointments of the year, a moment where expectation collided violently with reality, marking the beginning of a global reaction that would only grow louder, more intense, and far more revealing in the days to come. As dawn broke across different time zones, the reaction that had begun as scattered online chatter evolved into a full-scale digital wildfire, with trending sections dominated by clips, memes, and brutally honest reviews that dissected every awkward scene and emotional misstep, turning the film into a global talking point, not for its artistic achievements, but for how quickly it unraveled under public scrutiny, while influencers with millions of followers posted live reactions that ranged from stunned silence to sarcastic laughter, amplifying the narrative that this was not just a disappointment, but a cultural moment of collective disbelief. Major entertainment outlets soon followed, publishing headlines that used words like collapse, stunning flop, and unexpected disaster, breaking down early ticket numbers that fell far below even conservative projections, and interviews with anonymous theater staff who described nearly empty screening rooms just hours after release, painting a bleak picture of audience interest, while critics who had been cautiously optimistic suddenly shifted tone, questioning how such a heavily promoted project could miss the mark so dramatically, and the momentum of negativity began feeding on itself, growing stronger with every refresh of social media feeds. What made the backlash especially intense was the contrast between the film's grand marketing campaign and its modest delivery, with glossy trailers promising emotional depth, global relevance, and cinematic excellence, only for viewers to feel misled by what they perceived as shallow storytelling and forced symbolism. And this gap between promise and reality created a sense of betrayal that fueled even harsher reactions, as audiences tend to forgive small productions for imperfections but hold high-profile releases to a much stricter standard, especially when tied to globally recognized names. Behind closed doors, production executives reportedly scrambled into emergency meetings, reviewing damage control strategies, and debating whether to adjust advertising narratives or quietly scale back promotional spending, while distribution partners weighed the financial risks of continuing wide releases versus limiting exposure to reduce losses. And insiders whispered that early financial forecasts were being slashed in half, if not more, signaling that the project was quickly shifting from hopeful investment to cautionary example of how hype can collapse under real audience judgment. Meanwhile, Melania's public silence only intensified curiosity, with fans and critics alike searching for any reaction, statement, or sign of response, interpreting every lack of comment as either shock, disappointment, or strategic restraint. And speculation filled the vacuum, with commentators debating whether she had been overly shielded from honest feedback during production, or whether advisors had underestimated how modern audiences respond to celebrity-driven projects that appear more image-focused than story-focused, turning her absence from the conversation into part of the narrative itself. Cultural analysts began framing the situation as more than just a box office issue, suggesting it reflected a broader shift in how audiences perceive celebrity influence in creative industries, where name recognition alone no longer guarantees success, and where viewers demand authenticity, emotional connection, and genuine storytelling rather than polished branding. And this perspective transformed the film's failure into a symbolic moment about changing power dynamics in entertainment, making the story resonate far beyond one single project's performance. By the end of the second day, the phrase "unexpected flop" had evolved into historic disappointment, with international markets reporting similarly weak turnout, confirming that the reaction was not limited to one region, but echoed across continents. And as more negative reviews poured in and ticket sales continued to slide, it became clear that this was no temporary backlash that could be smoothed over with marketing tweaks, but a deep-rooted rejection that was shaping into one of the most talked-about cinematic collapses in recent memory. Inside the studio offices, where optimism had once filled every meeting room, the mood shifted from excitement to quiet panic as executives stared at real-time sales dashboards that refreshed every few minutes, each update confirming what nobody wanted to admit out loud, that the film's momentum was not slowing its fall but accelerating it. And emergency conference calls were scheduled across continents as financial partners demanded explanations for projections that had suddenly become meaningless, while marketing teams frantically reviewed audience feedback, searching for any positive angle that could be amplified to stabilize public perception. Producers who had championed the project from its earliest stages reportedly felt blindsided, insisting that early private screenings had been met with polite praise, now questioning whether honest criticism had been softened out of fear of offending high-profile figures associated with the film. And this realization sparked uncomfortable conversations about creative environments where fame may unintentionally silence truth, leading to polished projects that lack the emotional honesty audiences crave, turning internal culture itself into part of the film's downfall. Financial analysts began estimating potential losses in the tens of millions, factoring in production costs, global marketing campaigns, and distribution fees that now seemed impossible to recover through ticket sales alone, while investors quietly distanced themselves in public statements that emphasized long-term strategy and creative risk, language often used in the industry when projects underperform dramatically, and the numbers painted a brutal picture of how quickly a high-profile release can transform from hopeful blockbuster to financial liability. As as pressure mounted, rumors circulated about postponed international premieres, scaled-back advertising budgets, and even discussions of streaming platform negotiations far earlier than originally planned, signaling a shift from theatrical ambition to damage control mode. And while such moves are common in struggling releases, their sudden appearance so soon after launch sent a clear message that confidence in the film's box office potential had sharply declined. Media coverage grew increasingly intense, with nightly entertainment segments analyzing every misstep, from casting decisions to screenplay choices, while panel discussions debated whether the project had been driven more by image building than artistic vision. And these conversations often circled back to Melania's role as both a symbolic figure and a central marketing force, raising questions about whether the film had been unfairly judged due to its association with political celebrity, or whether it simply failed to meet basic storytelling expectations regardless of its famous connections. At the same time, fans who had initially defended the film found themselves outnumbered by critics, with online spaces becoming battlegrounds of opinion where some argued the backlash was exaggerated while others insisted the negative response was deserved. And this clash only kept the movie trending longer, though not in the way any studio hopes for, as sustained attention continued to highlight disappointment rather than discovery. By the end of the week, what had started as murmurs of concern had hardened into a widely accepted narrative of failure, with industry insiders openly acknowledging that the film's chances of recovery were slim, and the focus shifted from whether it could succeed to how quickly the losses could be contained, marking a painful turning point where ambition gave way to acceptance and setting the stage for even deeper emotional and reputational consequences yet to unfold. As the story refused to fade from headlines, the tone of coverage shifted from analytical to almost ruthless, with commentators no longer asking what went wrong, but instead framing the film as a symbol of overreach and misplaced confidence, using it as a case study in how influence does not always translate into creative success, while late-night shows turned awkward scenes into punchlines and viral clips edited for humor spread faster than any official trailer ever had, ensuring that even those who hadn't seen the movie now recognized it as a cultural punchline. Public conversations expanded beyond entertainment circles into broader discussions about privilege, opportunity, and the realities of creative industries, where many talented filmmakers struggle for recognition, while high-profile names can fast-track massive projects. And this perspective fueled resentment in some viewers, who saw the film's failure as proof that audiences ultimately decide value, not status, and that no amount of promotion can replace authentic connection, transforming disappointment into something closer to symbolic justice in the eyes of critics. Every appearance of Melania's past public image was suddenly re-examined, with media outlets revisiting old interviews, fashion moments, and previous efforts to remain distant from political chaos, now placing them alongside the film's failure to suggest a pattern of carefully managed public narratives facing raw public judgment. And while much of this analysis remained speculative, it contributed to a growing storyline that this cinematic collapse represented a rare moment where branding could no longer shield reputation from widespread critique. Insiders revealed that emotional stress within the creative team was reaching breaking points, with some staff reportedly worried about their future projects being impacted by association with a high-profile flop, while others expressed frustration that months or years of work were now being overshadowed by public ridicule, illustrating the human cost behind industry failures that often get reduced to box office numbers and headline jokes. Advertisers and promotional partners quietly began distancing themselves, removing film references from social campaigns and redirecting marketing budgets toward more promising projects, a subtle but powerful signal that confidence had evaporated. And these moves, though rarely announced publicly, further confirmed that the industry had already labeled the film a lost investment, accelerating its slide into obscurity. At the same time, critics intensified their scrutiny, publishing long-form reviews that dissected narrative weaknesses, character development flaws, and tonal inconsistencies, arguing that the film lacked a clear emotional core. And these detailed breakdowns shifted public opinion even further, as readers who might have been curious now felt assured they were not missing anything worthwhile, reinforcing the downward spiral. What once aimed to be a global cinematic moment had now become a cautionary tale whispered across studios and production meetings, reminding creatives of the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. And as the narrative hardened into one of humiliation rather than experimentation, the possibility of redemption seemed increasingly distant, paving the way for a final chapter focused not on box office numbers, but on lasting impact and lessons learned. By the time the second weekend numbers were released, there was no longer any room for hopeful interpretation, as the film's earnings had dropped sharply instead of stabilizing, confirming what insiders had feared from the very first screening, that this was not a slow burn misunderstood by early audiences, but a rapid collapse driven by widespread rejection, and that reality forced everyone involved to confront the permanence of the moment. Because in modern entertainment history, first impressions often define a project's entire legacy. And this one had already been stamped with disappointment in bold letters across global media. Observers began comparing the situation to other high-profile flops that once promised greatness but failed to deliver, noting how quickly public excitement can turn into collective mockery when expectations soar too high. And in each comparison, the same lesson emerged: that storytelling integrity always outweighs star power, and that audiences today are more informed, more vocal, and far less forgiving of projects that feel manufactured rather than heartfelt, turning the film's downfall into yet another example of hype meeting harsh reality. For Melania, the emotional weight of this public moment was likely far deeper than any financial loss, because while studios can recover money over time and investors can shift focus to new ventures, personal reputation is far harder to rebuild once a narrative of failure takes hold, especially in an era where digital memory never truly fades, and every clip, headline, and viral joke becomes part of a permanent online archive that shapes how future audiences perceive any new effort. Some supporters argued that the backlash had gone too far, suggesting that the film was being judged more harshly because of political associations rather than purely on artistic merit, while critics countered that the project simply did not meet the standards promised by its massive promotion. And this debate itself highlighted the complexity of public perception, where art, fame, and controversy often blend into a single narrative that can be nearly impossible to untangle, making it difficult to separate genuine critique from symbolic reaction. Yet beyond the noise of social media and headline drama, one undeniable truth stood out: that the audience had spoken clearly through empty theaters and declining ticket sales, and in the entertainment world, those numbers carry more power than any opinion column or viral post, acting as the final verdict on a project's success or failure. And in this case, they painted a picture of rejection that could not be ignored or spun into positivity. Industry veterans quietly reflected on how quickly the dream had unraveled, emphasizing that the film's journey would now be studied in business schools and production seminars as an example of how ambition without audience connection can collapse under its own weight, and how even global recognition cannot guarantee creative triumph, reinforcing a timeless rule of cinema that authenticity remains the most valuable currency in storytelling. In the end, what was meant to be a triumphant global moment instead became a powerful reminder of how unforgiving the spotlight can be, revealing that influence may open doors, but only genuine connection keeps them open. And as the noise slowly faded and the industry moved on to the next big release, this story remained etched as a lesson in humility, risk, and the unpredictable nature of public reception, leaving audiences not just entertained by the drama, but encouraged to reflect on the deeper forces that shape success and failure in modern media. And if this cinematic collapse taught anything, it is that in the world of storytelling, no name is bigger than the truth audiences feel when the screen lights up. Even after most major outlets had moved on to the next breaking story, the ripple effects of the film's collapse continued quietly shaping conversations in boardrooms, creative circles, and online communities, where long-form discussions replaced quick viral jokes as people began examining not just what failed on screen, but what the entire episode revealed about modern fame, influence, and the shifting power of audiences in the digital era, where every viewer holds the ability to amplify praise or destruction with a single post, turning entertainment releases into real-time public verdicts rather than slow-burn cultural experiences. Some industry insiders shared that the project had been surrounded by an atmosphere of extreme optimism from the start, where questioning creative choices felt uncomfortable due to the high-profile figures involved. And this environment may have unintentionally encouraged agreement over honest critique, a dynamic that has historically doomed many ambitious productions. because innovation thrives on challenge, not praise. And without strong voices pushing for improvement, even well-funded projects can drift into mediocrity disguised as greatness. As weeks passed, the film's presence in theaters shrank rapidly, replaced by newer releases that drew crowds and headlines, symbolizing how fast the entertainment world moves on from disappointment, yet the story itself lingered as a cautionary narrative referenced in articles about marketing strategy, celebrity branding, and audience psychology, transforming from a failed movie into a broader lesson about how hype can inflate expectations beyond what any single project can realistically deliver. Meanwhile, conversations around Melania's public image subtly evolved, with some observers expressing empathy for the personal toll of such a public setback, while others maintained that high-profile ventures naturally invite high-level scrutiny. And this contrast highlighted the complexity of fame in the modern age, where success brings admiration, but failure invites relentless analysis, leaving little space for quiet reflection or gradual improvement away from the spotlight. Younger filmmakers and creatives watching from the sidelines reportedly took the situation as both a warning and a motivation, seeing how even massive promotion cannot replace storytelling authenticity, and how audiences ultimately reward projects that feel genuine rather than manufactured, reinforcing a growing movement in the industry towards smaller, emotionally driven productions that prioritize substance over spectacle. Financially, the losses continued to settle across various partners involved, with some quietly absorbing the impact while others adjusted future investment strategies to avoid similar risks. And though such shifts rarely make headlines, they play a major role in shaping what kinds of films get greenlit in the future, influencing the direction of the industry long after a single project fades from public memory. And perhaps the most lasting impact of all was how this moment reminded viewers of their collective power, demonstrating that audiences are no longer passive consumers, but active participants in shaping cultural success, capable of lifting hidden gems to global fame or dismantling heavily marketed projects in days, leaving behind a powerful message that in today's media landscape, authenticity wins, hype fades, and the truth of storytelling always finds its voice through the people watching. In the end, what was meant to be a triumphant global moment instead became a powerful reminder of how unforgiving the spotlight can be, revealing that influence may open doors, but only genuine connection keeps them open. And as the noise slowly faded and the industry moved on to the next big release, this story remained etched as a lesson in humility, risk, and the unpredictable nature of public reception, leaving audiences not just entertained by the drama, but encouraged to reflect on the deeper forces that shape success and failure in modern media. And if this cinematic collapse taught anything, it is that in the world of storytelling, no name is bigger than the truth audiences feel when the screen lights up.